I never thought my life would become one of those cliché stories you read about on Reddit. But here I am, about to spill it all. It's been a nightmare, one that keeps unfolding in ways I couldn't have imagined. My wife, Natalie, has always been a bit dramatic. Maybe that's why I fell for her in the first place. There was something about her energy, always the loudest in the room, always demanding attention. At first, it was thrilling, like being on a roller coaster you never wanted to get off. But over time, that excitement became exhausting. Still, I thought it was just a phase. Everyone has their moments, right? For the last few months, she's been taking taxis more often than usual. It didn't seem like a big deal. I mean, I work long hours, and she doesn't drive, so I figured she just needed to get around. She'd always mention this one driver. Dima. She talked about him like he was a personal chauffeur or something. Dima was so sweet today. Or, Dima helped me with my bags. At first, I thought it was harmless. He was just some guy trying to make a living. But then, she started booking rides with him specifically. Even when I was home and could drive her, she'd make some excuse like, "Oh, Dima's already on his way." Or, "You're tired, let Dima handle it." I didn't think too much of it, just another quirk of hers. Until she started coming home later than usual. She'd tell me she went shopping, met a friend, or got caught up running errands. But she didn't have much to show for it. No new clothes, no shopping bags, just vague explanations and her phone glued to her hand. That was when the nagging doubt started to creep in, but I kept pushing it down. It's Natalie, I'd tell myself. She's loud, she's wild, but she's not a Che. Boy, was I wrong. It wasn't until one Friday evening that things really started to feel off. Natalie had been out for hours. She said she was meeting an old friend for drinks, but when I texted to ask when she'd be back, she took forever to respond. And when she did, her messages were vague, almost like she didn't want me to know where she was. I remember pacing around the house, trying to distract myself, but something wasn't sitting right. I opened the fridge, poured myself a drink, and checked my phone again. Still nothing. Finally, close to midnight, she came home. Her hair was disheveled, and her shirt was buttoned up wrong, like she'd gotten dressed in a hurry. My heart sank, but I tried to play it cool. "How was your night?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She gave me a quick smile, too quick. "It was fine," she said, brushing past me. "You know how girls' nights can get. We had a few too many, and time just flew by." But something about the way she said it, the way she avoided eye contact, it felt off. There was a coldness in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I decided not to press her, at least not yet. I didn't want to seem paranoid. The next day, I tried to shake it off, but the suspicion lingered. I went to check her phone when she wasn't looking, something I never felt the need to do before. But of course, it was locked, and she never used to be so secretive with her passcode. Still, I told myself to trust her. This was Natalie. She wasn't perfect, but she was my wife. And we'd been through so much together. There had to be a reasonable explanation, right? But then came the weekend trip that changed everything. We had planned a weekend getaway to the mountains for months. It was supposed to be our time to reconnect, just the two of us. But as the day approached, I noticed Natalie seemed distant. She was preoccupied, scrolling through her phone more than usual, and she had that nervous energy about her, like she was hiding something. On the drive up, she was uncharacteristically quiet. I tried to make small talk, but she would only respond with half-hearted answers. The vibe was off, and it felt like an elephant was sitting between us in the car. I kept wondering if this was the moment I should confront her, but I didn't want to ruin our trip. That night, we went out to dinner at a cozy little restaurant. Natalie ordered a drink and then another. I watched her laugh too loudly at jokes and flirt a bit with the waiter, who was young and fit. A flicker of jealousy gnawed at me, but I brushed it off. Just Natalie being Natalie, I thought. After dinner, we walked back to our cabin, the cold air biting at our skin. As we entered, I noticed her phone buzz on the counter. She didn't even glance at it. Curiosity clawed at me, but I forced myself to look away. I didn't want to be that guy, snooping through her things. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I rolled over to find her sleeping soundly, her face relaxed. She looked innocent, but I couldn't help thinking about Dima. Had she been seeing him during her late-night outings? When I woke up in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep. I heard her phone buzz again. This time, I felt compelled to check. I carefully picked it up, and my heart raced as I unlocked it with her Face ID, the very same trick I never thought I would use. What I found made my stomach drop. There were messages with Dima, and they were far too intimate for just a driver. They joked about secret meetings, shared flirty emojis, and even suggested they get together outside of work. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I knew I needed more proof. I had to find out the truth before making any accusations. So I took a deep breath, closed her phone, and settled back into bed, pretending to be asleep, while my mind raced through the chaos of emotions swirling inside me. The next day, I tried to act normal. We spent the morning hiking, but all I could think about was her phone and the messages I had seen. I struggled to focus on the beauty around us, the vibrant autumn leaves, the crisp mountain air. Instead, every step felt heavy, as if I were dragging an anchor behind me. As we reached a scenic overlook, I pulled Natalie close for a photo. "Smile," I said, forcing a grin. She flashed her usual bright smile, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that hung over me like a storm cloud. After our hike, I suggested we visit a local coffee shop to unwind. It was there, over steaming mugs, that the atmosphere shifted again. Natalie's phone buzzed relentlessly on the table. My heart raced as I watched her glance at it, her expression tightening. She hesitated before reaching for it, but I was faster. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she was caught off guard. "Just a friend from work," she replied quickly, her voice slightly shaky. "From work?" I pressed, not backing down. "You seem awfully close to this friend." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You're being ridiculous. It's just harmless banter, okay?" But I wasn't convinced. The tension in the air thickened, and I felt the familiar urge to confront her about Dima. Instead, I held my breath and waited, hoping she might slip up. When we returned to the cabin that evening, I had made up my mind. I needed to gather more evidence. I excused myself, saying I was going to take a shower, and in reality, I was heading for her phone again. As I rifled through her messages, I stumbled upon something I hadn't expected, a series of photos. They were intimate, playful shots of her with Dima, clearly taken during their outings. Some were just the two of them, others showed them laughing and sharing drinks. My heart sank as I scrolled, each image confirming my worst fears. Then I found a message that sent chills down my spine. It read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll pick you up at 8. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. I had to confront her. I couldn't let this continue. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as I stepped out of the bathroom, ready to confront the woman I thought I knew. But before I could say anything, Natalie grabbed her purse and announced, "I'm heading out to meet a friend. I'll be back later." The words felt like a dagger, and without thinking, I blurted out, "Is that Dima?" Her face turned pale, the color draining as she froze. For a heartbeat, it was as if time stopped. Then she exploded, her voice rising as she shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you? You have no right to question me!" Her reaction was explosive, a mix of anger and hysteria that caught me off guard. I felt the adrenaline surge through my veins. This was it. I couldn't let her deflect any longer. I had to make her face the truth. "I saw the messages, Natalie. I know everything." She stared at me, eyes wide and wild, before she launched into a flurry of frantic lies. "You're misinterpreting everything. Dima is just a friend. You're so insecure." But I could see through her hysterics. I was done with the lies. No more. This is over. I'm done with your games. The air crackled with tension, and in that moment, I felt an unexpected clarity. I would file for divorce. I didn't care what it took. I just wanted out. The atmosphere in the cabin felt like a pressure cooker, with emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. Natalie's frantic energy was palpable, and I could see the gears turning in her head as she tried to salvage the situation. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. You don't understand. You're blowing this all out of proportion. I clenched my fists, battling the urge to raise my voice. Blowing it out of proportion? You've been meeting Dima behind my back. I have the proof right here. I waved her phone in front of her, determined to shove the reality in her face. She swatted it away, her voice rising again. That doesn't mean anything. You're twisting it. We just hang out sometimes. It's not what you think. Not what I think. I shot back, incredulity spilling out of my voice. You've been lying to me. How long has this been going on? How many times have you met him? Tears brimmed in her eyes, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. I was done being the one who cared more. You need to tell me the truth, Natalie. Now. She hesitated, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her expression, but it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. You're the one who never trusted me. This is all your fault. Don't you dare turn this around on me. You're the one who decided to betray our marriage. Her hysterics hit a peak, and she began pacing, her mind racing. I can't believe you're doing this. You're ruining everything. I can't believe you went through my stuff. That's such an invasion of privacy. An invasion? I laughed bitterly. You think I wanted to? I was trying to convince myself I was wrong. I wanted to trust you. Just then, her phone buzzed again, and my heart dropped as I saw Dima's name flash across the screen. It was another message from him. I'm outside, it read. I glanced at her, and the realization hit me hard. She was about to run off to him, to the man who had taken her away from me. You're seriously going to leave? I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. You're just going to walk out that door and pretend everything's fine. She shot me a glare that could cut glass. You don't understand anything. Dima makes me feel alive. You don't even notice me anymore. Something inside me snapped. And you think running to him will solve anything? You're delusional. Suddenly, she whipped out her phone and started typing furiously. I'm done with this conversation. If you can't trust me, then maybe we're better off apart. Her words felt like a slap in the face, and I took a step closer, my heart racing with a mixture of fury and betrayal. You're right. We are better off apart. But I'm filing for divorce the moment we get home. She looked up at me, eyes wide with disbelief, as if I had just slapped her. You wouldn't dare! Oh, I would. I've had enough of your lies and manipulation. It's over, Natalie. In that moment, it felt like the world had shifted. I was finally standing up for myself, and the weight of the betrayal slowly began to lift. But then, just as I thought she would finally break down, she snapped back, her voice dripping with venom. Good luck finding someone who will put up with your jealousy and insecurities. You'll be alone, just like you deserve. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow wash over me. This wasn't the woman I had married. She was a stranger now, someone who had traded our love for a fleeting thrill. Before I could say anything else, she stormed out of the cabin, slamming the door behind her. I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of her words lingering in the air. I needed to gather my thoughts, but the adrenaline was coursing through me, and I knew this wasn't over. I had to find her. I had to confront her one last time before she ran into the arms of her lover. I burst out of the cabin, my heart pounding as I raced down the path. I could hear her voice carrying through the crisp mountain air, her laughter mingling with Dima's, so carefree, so infuriating. The moment felt surreal, like a scene from a bad movie where the betrayed partner races after their unfaithful spouse. But this was my life, and the stakes were heartbreakingly real. As I turned the corner, I spotted her leaning against the passenger side of Dima's taxi, Her body language completely relaxed, like she hadn't just had a massive argument with me. Dima was standing beside her, grinning like he had just won the lottery. I felt a surge of anger wash over me. "Natalie!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the trees. She froze, her smile faltering as she turned to face me, her expression morphing from surprise to annoyance. "What do you want, Tom?" she snapped, arms crossed defiantly over her chest. "I want to know how you can stand there, looking so smug after everything you've done." I stepped closer, the distance between us closing as I pointed an accusatory finger at Dima. "And you? Who do you think you are, swooping in like some knight in shining armor?" Dima's grin faded slightly, but he quickly regained his composure. "Chill out, man. I'm just doing my job. She chose to ride with me, and that's all there is to it." "Oh, spare me the act!" I shot back, turning my ire back to Natalie. "You can't seriously think this is just some innocent friendship, can you?" Natalie rolled her eyes dramatically. "Here we go again. You're making a scene for no reason. It's pathetic." "Pathetic?" I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, anger mixing with despair. "Pathetic is you running away from our marriage, acting like this is all a game. You think you can just walk out and not face the consequences?" "Consequences?" She laughed, a hollow sound that made my blood boil. "You're the one who's been too busy working to even notice me. You want to blame me for everything? Fine. But I deserve to feel alive. Dima makes me feel that way." In that moment, the hurt and betrayal coiled tightly within me. "You think this is about feeling alive? You're trading real love for a cheap thrill. You're going to regret this." Dima stepped in, trying to defend her. "Look, man, she's an adult. If she wants to be with me, that's her choice. You can't control her." I shot him a furious glare. "I'm not trying to control her. I'm trying to make her see the truth. You're just a distraction, a way for her to escape what she really has." Natalie's expression shifted, flickering with something that almost resembled guilt. But before I could grasp it, she snapped back to her defensive stance. "You don't know anything about me or what I want." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "You're right. I don't. But what I do know is that this is the end of the line for us. I'm done with the lies. I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes widened in shock, the bravado faltering for a moment. "You wouldn't dare!" "I absolutely would. And I'll make sure everyone knows why." She laughed bitterly, a harsh sound that cut through the air. "Good luck with that. No one will believe you, Tom. You'll be the crazy ex-husband who couldn't keep his wife satisfied." Just then, Dima took a step back, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. "Maybe this is a bad idea, Natalie. I don't want any trouble." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "No! This is my life, and I'll handle it." But something in her tone felt off. I realized she was trying to hold on to the image she'd crafted, the life she had built on deceit. I could almost see the cracks forming in her facade, and I pressed on. "You can keep pretending this is real, but deep down, you know it's just a fling. You're running from our marriage instead of confronting your issues." Natalie's face twisted with frustration, and in that moment, I could see the weight of her choices bearing down on her. But then she shook her head, as if trying to clear her thoughts. "You don't get it, Tom. You never did." With that, she turned to Dima and climbed into the taxi, leaving me standing there, my heart shattered. As the taxi pulled away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had confronted her, but it felt like the fight was only beginning. I knew I had to act fast. If I wanted out of this marriage, I couldn't just sit back and wait for the dust to settle. I had to file for divorce and take back my life. I couldn't let her win. The ride back home felt surreal. The mountains that had once seemed like a romantic escape now loomed ominously in the rearview mirror. As I drove, my mind raced through the confrontation, replaying every moment. I felt like I had lost a part of myself, but at the same time, a sense of clarity began to settle in. I arrived home to an empty house, the silence echoing through the hallways. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank into the couch, staring blankly at the wall. I had never felt so alone. Hours passed as I sat there, grappling with my emotions. I thought about the life we had built together, the laughter and joy that now felt like a distant memory. But alongside the grief, a fire ignited within me. I was done being a victim in my own story. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound determination. I grabbed my laptop and began researching the divorce process. I needed to know my rights, what I could expect, and how to protect myself. Each click felt liberating. I was taking control of my life, inch by inch. As I drafted the necessary documents, I could hear Natalie's voice echoing in my head, taunting me with her lies and manipulation. But this time, instead of feeling helpless, I felt empowered. I wouldn't let her walk away without facing the consequences of her actions. That afternoon, I decided to reach out to a lawyer. The conversation was eye-opening. I laid out the details of our relationship, my suspicions, and the confrontation. The lawyer listened intently, occasionally nodding as I spoke. "It sounds like you have a solid case," he said, his tone serious. "We can get started on the paperwork right away." After hanging up, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I was moving forward, but part of me still dreaded the confrontation that lay ahead. I would have to face Natalie again, and I knew she wouldn't take the news lightly. Days turned into a week, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. I had filed for divorce. I was finally taking a stand for myself, but I was also bracing for Natalie's inevitable explosion. Then came the day I had dreaded. I received a text from Natalie asking to meet. "We need to talk," it read. My stomach churned at the thought of seeing her again, but I couldn't back down now. I agreed to meet at the cafe where we used to go on our dates, a place heavy with memories. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, her expression unreadable. As I approached, I could see that she had put on a brave face, but I could still sense the tension crackling between us. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of nervousness. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened." "Have you?" I replied, my tone guarded. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been too busy to care." She sighed, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "Tom, I know I messed up. But you have to understand that it wasn't just about Dima. I felt trapped. I wanted to feel free again." "Free?" I echoed, incredulity flooding my voice. "You think cheating on your husband is freedom? You shattered our trust." I know, she snapped, her voice rising. "But this isn't just black and white. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I shook my head, feeling the anger bubbling up inside me. "You can't keep making excuses for your behavior, Natalie. This is a choice you made. I'm done with the lies, and I'm done with you." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But I quickly pushed it away. "You had your chance to come clean. Now it's too late. Is there really no way we can fix this?" she pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. "I love you. We can work through this." I stared at her, the memories of our love swirling in my mind, but they felt tainted now, stained by betrayal. "Love isn't enough when trust is gone. I've already filed for divorce." Her face paled, the reality of my words hitting her like a slap. "You can't be serious," she gasped, her voice cracking. "You're throwing everything away?" "It's you who threw it away," I said firmly, feeling the weight of my decision settle over me. "I'm moving on, Natalie. It's time for both of us to face the consequences of our choices." As I stood up to leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had confronted her, stood my ground, and reaffirmed my decision. I was finally ready to reclaim my life. But as I walked away, a part of me wondered how this story would end. Would she finally come to terms with her actions? Would she seek the help she clearly needed? I didn't know, and honestly, it no longer mattered. I had my own journey to focus on, and it was time to take the first step into my new life. In the weeks that followed, life began to take on a new rhythm. I moved through my days with purpose, immersing myself in work and reconnecting with friends. Each day felt like a small victory as I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been lost in the turmoil of my marriage. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but I was determined to not let it define me. The divorce process was challenging, but my lawyer guided me through every step. Each document signed felt like a nail in the coffin of my old life. I found a strange sense of comfort in knowing that I was no longer tethered to someone who had chosen to betray our vows. I spent more time with my friends, and we often went out for drinks or hikes, rediscovering the joy of companionship without the shadow of my marriage hanging over me. They were my support system, reminding me of the life I could have outside of my broken relationship. One evening, while out with friends, I met someone new, Lila. She was warm and funny, her laughter infectious. We bonded over shared interests, and I felt a spark that I hadn't experienced in years. Still, memories of Natalie would occasionally creep in, especially during quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. I found myself reflecting on what had gone wrong, analyzing the signs I had missed and the moments I had overlooked. I realized that while I had loved her deeply, I had also ignored the signs of her discontent. But I refused to dwell on the past. I focused on what lay ahead. Lila and I began dating casually, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hope and excitement about the future. We explored new restaurants, went on hikes, and laughed late into the night. I allowed myself to be vulnerable again, to trust and to open my heart, albeit cautiously. As the divorce finalized, I felt a mix of relief and liberation. There was no longer a weight pulling me down. I had taken control of my narrative, transforming pain into strength. I attended therapy sessions to help process the emotional fallout from my marriage, allowing me to grow and understand what I truly wanted in a partner. One evening, while sitting in a park with Lila, I looked over at her, the golden sunset casting a warm glow over us. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for how far I had come. "I'm really glad I met you," I said, my voice sincere. She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I'm glad too. You deserve to be happy." As I took her hand, I realized that I was no longer that insecure man plagued by jealousy and betrayal. I was someone new, someone who had learned to stand up for himself and move forward. In the months that followed, Lila and I grew closer, building a relationship based on trust and mutual respect. I was still cautious, but I found myself opening up to the possibility of love again. I learned that relationships take work and that it's crucial to communicate openly about needs and fears. Eventually, I came to a profound realization. While the betrayal had hurt me deeply, it had also set me free. I had discovered my strength and resilience, and I was finally learning to embrace life with all its uncertainties. As I stood on the cusp of this new beginning, I felt ready for whatever the future held. I wouldn't let the shadows of my past dictate my happiness. I was moving forward, one step at a time, and it felt exhilarating. This was my life now, a life filled with possibilities, hope, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.